Clearly, our objective as a league and to all 32 clubs, which was unanimous, is that we want people to be respectful at the national anthem. We want people to stand. That's all personnel, and make sure that they treat this moment in a respectful fashion. That's something that we think we owe. We've been very sensitive in making sure that we give players choices, but we do believe that that moment is an important moment.
That was NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell explaining the league's new policy regarding the national anthem, and teams and league personnel will get fined if they don't follow it. This after kneeling protests over the past couple of years have sparked a firestorm of controversy. On Fox and Friends this morning, President Trump reacting to the new policy.
I don't think people should be staying in locker rooms, but still, I think it's good. You have to stand proudly for the national anthem. Well, you shouldn't be playing. You shouldn't be there. Maybe you shouldn't be in the country. You have to stand proudly for the national anthem. And the NFL owners did the right thing if that's what they've done.
Joining us now is Leslie Marshall, Fox News contributor and syndicated radio talk show host of The Leslie Marshall Show, and Alex Conant, former communications director for Marco Rubio and partner at Firehouse Strategies. Leslie, we're talking about this again. Here we go. Football season is starting. Was it smart of them to have a policy and put it out there right at the beginning? Or are they bringing something back up that, people are on both sides are kind of frustrated with?
I'm glad you asked the question in that manner, Melissa, because I think it's the latter. I think this is a problem. I mean, at first, the NFL players were very happy. They felt that the organization had their backs. They don't feel that now. The idea of a protest in the tunnel or in the locker room isn't a protest. It's sort of like if a tree falls in the forest, but no one's there to see it or hear it, did it fall? With regard to the First Amendment, to me, this is spitting upon freedom in the Constitution. And Melissa, as a woman, it also bothers me that the NFL seems to care more about taking a knee, about protesting and the national anthem than some of the other terrible things that many of the players in the NFL have been accused of, and that's domestic violence and other things. So to me, this is just really bad all around for the players, for those that go to the games, and honestly, even for the Me Too movement.
Alex, picking a scab off a wound, or getting it, dressing it head on before the season even gets started?
Yeah, look, I'm a big football fan, and so I just give the commissioner credit for finally making a decision. I think later is better than never in this case. Look, last year these protests week after week, it was a distraction from the game for the reason why fans like me tuned in for the first place. So I think the commissioner is right to finally address it. I give a lot of credit to the president here for keeping this on the radar, for keeping the pressure on the NFL, basically forcing the owners to make this decision. The players, they still have an option if they don't want to stand for the national anthem. They can wait in the locker room now. Yeah. But at least there's a clear policy that the players and everyone can look to. Everyone can be on the same page, and we can focus on football.
Yeah, Leslie, I'm not advocating for this. I'm just saying, playing the other side. Are they kind of saying move on by saying we've seen the protests, a lot of people have taken a knee, so now at this point you can stand out there proudly, or you do have the choice to stay inside, but let's move on? What do you think of sort of interpreting the decision that way?
Well, I like the idea that they have something that the entire league can agree on. I don't like what they've agreed to, and I think this is not only going to reopen a wound, but I think that players are going to become quite creative and find other ways of protest without taking a knee and without being in the tunnel and without being in the locker room. So I think they're actually, putting the spotlight on an issue once again that they want to go away because of some, failed ratings and sponsors complaining, and the bottom line, which is money, and that's what they care about. But our tax dollars, Melissa, don't pay for this. So that's what bothers me about the president weighing in, because this is not something like, oh, okay, this is a federal entity. This is a sport.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Alex, he has the right to free speech just like everybody else. Everybody's out there sort of expressing an opinion, but at the end of the day, it is a business. The owners do own the teams and their images, and they're trying to react to what gets ratings and what fills the stands and do what's right from a financial perspective. They are businesses.
That's absolutely right. Look, I do a lot of crisis communications, and I think what we saw the NFL go through last year was a classic crisis where they didn't have standards in place. They didn't have a specific policy that they could fall back on and say, no, the players are not allowed to protest like this. They're not allowed to damage the business, the NFL as a business, by causing these distractions. Now they have that policy in place, and hopefully it'll make things much smoother moving forward.
Okay.
And I think the president has every right to speak out about it, organizations that are as important to the American people as the NFL is.
I want to point out to people what they're seeing at the bottom of the screen there. The president is getting ready to sign a rollback of Dodd-Frank, but what is significant about this as well is that it's the first time we're going to see him out there at the podium since the meeting with North Korea. The summit has been canceled, so we sort of expect that perhaps in conjunction, in addition to talking about what he's actually there for. And you see Wilbur Ross there on the right, who obviously has a lot to do with everything business related, and that's what this is about. We expect he might say something about North Korea as well. Leslie, what do you think?
Well, if we're talking about North Korea, Melissa, I don't think this is the art of a good deal. And the reason I say that is we have angered Russia and China, but more so a key ally, which is South Korea. This could have been a very historic meeting. And I think that the president, the way he has put it, is sort of said, I hope you come back to the table. And it's like, no, President Trump, you canceled this meeting. And I understand why he did it. But to me, it becomes childish to say, look, you said something that we don't like. You made a statement we don't like. Meetings off. That's a different kind of deal. Yeah. Maybe it works in the boardroom, but not on an international level with regarding nuclear weapons and diplomacy.
Although, Alex, I would say that's specifically not how it works in the boardroom, and that when you sit there and you say respectfully, you know what, we can't make it any further, we're not going to have this meeting, it's not about what was said. It is about the specifics of the deal that they were negotiating behind the scenes, and the idea that the president is sort of saying, you have my best and final offer. If you're not interested in that, and maybe that's what was going on, we are now canceling this summit. What do you think of that interpretation of today's events? Because there are a lot of folks out there saying that that's what they think is really going on here.
That's absolutely right. Look, normally when heads of state meet, like they were going to meet next month in Singapore, it's to codify some sort of an agreement. And so they put the deadline out there of June 12th and say, we're going to have an agreement by then. Clearly, given the North Koreans' recent statements, they were not ready to make a deal. And the deal has to include that they get rid of their nuclear weapons. And so if you're not going to have a deal in place for that June 12th meeting, the president's absolutely right to cancel the meeting. It keeps the pressure on the North Koreans. The sanctions remain in place. In the meantime, we've gotten the hostages back. They destroyed one of their nuclear test facilities this morning. So, look, I think progress is being made with the president's policies. We still have a long way to go. It's still a tremendous threat, but there's no doubt in my mind, and I think most senators in the buildings behind me would agree with this, there's no doubt that canceling the meeting was the right thing to do because the time was not right. The agreement was not in place. It was not going to be a productive use of everyone's time and could potentially be a big setback in terms of keeping the sanctions in place long term.
Yeah, Leslie, you don't think this is the last we're hearing of this in this meeting and this negotiation, do you?
No, absolutely not. Quite frankly, and I'm not a big fan of the president, Melissa, but I do think that he actually sitting down with Kim Jong-un might get farther. I think they have some similar traits in their personalities, and I think, quite frankly, if a deal is to be made, that's when it's hammered out. It's not agreed to before. I think we're naive to think that Kim Jong-un was going to come to the table and say, okay, I'm going to completely denuclearize North Korea with American troops still in South Korea. He's not going to do that. His father and grandfather wouldn't have agreed to that, and neither will he.
Alex, she makes a bunch of good points. It does seem like it's possible, they're talking about kind of what they're going to agree to. Maybe they have got to a stalling point. They don't necessarily have to have every detail worked out before he goes, in the sense that he does tend to do better with people when he's in the room. What do you think?
I think that's right, and I think that some details could potentially be ironed out between the two leaders when they actually meet face to face. However, when their principles are so far apart, that is, the U.S. is demanding that he gets rid of his nuclear weapons, and he's saying that there's absolutely no circumstances he's going to get rid of the nuclear weapons, I don't know how you resolve that in about 10 or 12 days between now and when they were going to have that meeting. I think it's better to leave the sanctions in place, because here's the other issue. Yeah. The moment you have that meeting, the pressure comes off the North Koreans in terms of the sanctions. They can blame Trump, they can blame the U.S. for being unreasonable, and then it's easier for the Chinese to take the pressure off of the North Koreans vis-a-vis the sanctions. So look, the most important thing that President Trump can do moving forward is keep the sanctions sanctions on the North Koreans. It's bringing them to the table. They need to come ready to make a deal. If they weren't ready to make a deal on June 12th, he did the right thing to cancel that meeting.
It's very transparent, this process, Leslie. I mean, to hear his note back to Kim Jong-un, to have it out there in the public to read, and also to hear the language and feel like that's not his normal language. So to me, it seems to indicate that there's still a ton of diplomacy going on, and it seemed like every word in that letter was very carefully chosen to deliver a specific message. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you 100%. I think some of the letter is quintessential Donald Trump. But I think there is certainly diplomacy thanking for the hostage release. I felt that we had and we're building a good relationship, although I do think that may be the president's own words. It's clear that somebody looked this over, maybe edited and tweaked it, as they should, as they would with any leader. You know what's interesting, though, Melissa, is that unfortunately at this moment, the president finds himself, which for the past 50 years, administrations both left and right have found themselves in, which is a bit of a quagmire with North Korea. Imposing sanctions, hoping to have meetings or diplomacy, which, by the way, both left and right criticize each other for. But we've seen Obama and Clinton, we've seen Bush and Reagan, and the other Bush, Daddy Bush, have the same problems with regard to North Korea, regardless of who is leading that country at the time, as we're seeing right now the president is grappling with Kim Jong-un at the helm.